The morning started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. William sat at his desk, reviewing the day's schedule while Kate finished her breakfast in the sunlit dining room. Their 3 children had already left for school, filling the house with their usual morning chaos before peace settled over the royal residence. Kate noticed the tension in William's shoulders as he stared at his phone. For weeks, he'd been receiving cryptic messages from someone claiming to have important information about his late mother, Princess Diana. The messages were always brief, always mysterious, and always unsigned. William had chosen to ignore them, dismissing them as another attempt by someone seeking attention or money. But this morning was different. The message was more specific, more urgent. It mentioned a location, a time, and something that made William's blood run cold. The sender claimed to have evidence that would change everything the royal family believed about that tragic night in Paris 25 years ago. Kate walked into the study, carrying 2 cups of tea. She immediately noticed the pale expression on her husband's face. His hands were trembling slightly as he held the phone, reading and rereading the message that had arrived just moments before. "What is it?" Kate asked, setting down the tea and moving closer to William's chair. She had learned to read his moods over their years together. This was different from his usual stress about royal duties or public appearances. William looked up at his wife, his blue eyes filled with confusion and something else she couldn't quite identify. Fear, perhaps, or hope, or both mixed together in a way that made her heart race. "Someone wants to meet with me," William said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "They say they have information about my mother's death. Real information, not the conspiracy theories or tabloid nonsense we usually hear." Kate felt her stomach drop. They had both learned to live with the constant speculation about Diana's death, the endless theories and investigations that seemed to resurface every few years. But something about William's expression told her this was different. The sender had provided an address in central London, a small cafe that Kate recognized as one of the places Diana used to visit when she wanted to escape the palace and feel normal for a few hours. The coincidence felt too specific to be random. William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where his children played every afternoon. He thought about his mother's legacy, about the questions that had haunted him for decades, about the official investigations that had satisfied some people but never quite satisfied him. "We don't have to go," Kate said, joining him at the window. "We don't have to put ourselves through this again." But even as she said the words, Kate knew that William would go. He had spent his entire adult life carrying the weight of unanswered questions, the burden of being Diana's son in a world that would never let him forget the circumstances of her death. The message had included one final detail that made it impossible to ignore. The sender claimed to have been present on the night Diana died, claimed to have seen things that were never reported, never investigated, never brought to light. They promised proof, evidence that would finally give William the answers he had been seeking his entire life. William turned back to his wife. Kate saw the decision in his eyes before he spoke. "I have to go," he said simply. "I have to know." Kate nodded, understanding that this moment had been inevitable. She had watched William struggle with the questions about his mother's death, had seen him search for peace in official reports and investigations that never quite provided the closure he needed. They spent the rest of the morning making arrangements. William would go alone to the meeting while Kate stayed home with the children. They agreed on a simple code system, a way for William to communicate if he needed help or if the situation became dangerous. As the afternoon approached, William changed into civilian clothes, trying to blend in with the crowd of ordinary Londoners who would never recognize the future king in jeans and a simple sweater. Kate watched him prepare. Knowing that whatever happened in that cafe would change their lives forever, the drive to central London felt endless. Traffic moving slowly through the busy streets while William's mind raced with possibilities. Thought about his mother's smile, her laugh, the way she used to sneak chocolate to him and Harry when they were supposed to be eating healthy palace food. But mostly, he thought about the questions that had kept him awake so many nights. Wondering about what really happened in that tunnel in Paris, and whether the truth was something he was finally ready to hear. The cafe was smaller than William had expected, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop on a quiet street in Bloomsbury. He recognized it immediately from old photographs he had seen of his mother. Diana had been photographed here several times in the months before her death, always sitting at the same corner table, always looking relaxed and happy in a way that seemed impossible within the palace walls. William pushed open the glass door, hearing the familiar chime of a bell that announced his arrival. The afternoon crowd was thin, just a few students with laptops and an elderly couple sharing a pot of tea. He scanned the room, looking for someone who might be waiting for him. At the corner table where his mother used to sit, a woman in her 50s sat alone, nervously stirring a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. She looked up when William entered, and their eyes met across the small space. There was recognition there, but also something else, relief perhaps, or gratitude that he had actually come. William approached the table slowly, still unsure whether he was making a terrible mistake. The woman stood up as he got closer, and he could see her hands shaking slightly. She was well-dressed, but not expensively so, with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded him somehow of his mother. "Your Royal Highness," she said quietly, her voice carrying a slight accent that William couldn't quite place. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," William admitted, sitting down across from her. "I'm not even sure why I'm here." The woman smiled sadly, and William noticed that her eyes were already filling with tears. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she said. "I was your mother's friend. More than that. I was there the night she died." William felt his heart stop. In all the investigations, all the witness statements, all the official reports, he had never heard this name. Sarah Mitchell had never testified, never been questioned, never appeared in any of the documents that had consumed investigators for years. "I don't understand," William said, his voice carefully controlled. "If you were there, why didn't you speak to the police? Why didn't you testify at the inquest?" Sarah's hands were trembling now, and she gripped her coffee cup tighter to steady them. "Because I was afraid," she said simply. "Because I was told to stay quiet. Not because I was a coward who chose to protect myself instead of honoring your mother's memory." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents and photographs. William stared at it, knowing that whatever was inside would change everything he thought he knew about that night in Paris. "Your mother called me that evening," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger as she began to tell her story. "She was frightened, more frightened than I had ever heard her. She said she had discovered something that could destroy powerful people. She needed somewhere safe to hide until she could figure out what to do." William listened in stunned silence as Sarah described a phone call he had never heard about, a conversation that had taken place just hours before his mother's death. According to Sarah, Diana had been carrying documents that evening. Papers that contained evidence of corruption and cover-ups that reached the highest levels of government. "She was supposed to meet me at my hotel," Sarah said, sliding the envelope. "Across the table, she never made it. But what she was carrying, what she had discovered, it's all in there." William stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "How do you have this?" he asked. Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue, struggling to maintain her composure. "Because I went to the crash site," she said. "I went there looking for her, and I found her car before the official investigators arrived. I found these documents scattered on the ground, and I took them. I took them and I ran, and I've been carrying this guilt for 25 years. The cafe seemed to fade away around them as William processed what he was hearing. His mother had been investigating something, had discovered something important enough to kill for. The official story about paparazzi and a drunk driver suddenly seemed inadequate, incomplete. "What kind of documents?" William asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice, even though they were alone in their corner of the cafe. "Evidence of arms deals, of money laundering, of contracts that were awarded to companies with connections to people your mother trusted. She had been investigating for months, following leads that started with her charity work and led her into a world of corruption that she never could have imagined."
Ow.
William felt sick. The image of his mother as a humanitarian, as someone who cared about people and wanted to make the world better, was crashing into this new reality of Diana as an investigator. As someone who had stumbled onto dangerous secrets, she was going to expose it all, Sarah continued. She had meetings scheduled with journalists, with government officials who she thought she could trust. But someone found out, someone who had too much to lose if the truth came out. William finally reached for the envelope, his hands shaking as he felt the weight of whatever evidence his mother had died trying to protect. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Why wait 25 years? Sarah smiled through her tears, and for a moment she looked exactly like his mother. "Because I'm dying," she said simply. "I have cancer, and I don't have much time left. I can't take this secret with me to the grave. Your mother deserves better than that, and so do you." William held the envelope against his chest, feeling the weight of 25 years of questions and grief and unanswered prayers. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked. "I want you to finish what she started," Sarah said. "I want you to make sure the truth comes out, no matter how powerful the people who tried to silence her. I want you to give your mother the justice she never got." William drove back to Kensington Palace in a daze, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, and he had to pull over twice because his vision was blurred with tears. Everything he thought he knew about his mother's death was crumbling around him. The official investigations, the inquests, the endless speculation in the media, none of it had come close to the truth that Sarah Mitchell had just revealed. Anna hadn't been a victim of paparazzi or a drunk driver. She had been a threat too. Powerful people, and she had been eliminated. When he finally arrived home, Kate was waiting in the entrance hall. She took one look at his face and immediately wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight as he struggled to process what he had learned. "What happened?" she asked softly, guiding him to the living room where they could talk privately. William sat down heavily on the sofa, the envelope still clutched in his hands. "Everything we believed was a lie," he said, his voice hollow. "My mother was murdered, Kate. She was investigating something huge, something that could have brought down the government, and they killed her for it." Kate felt the blood drain from her face. She had always suspected that there was more to Diana's death than the official story, but hearing William say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. William opened it with shaking hands, spreading the contents. Across the coffee table, there were photographs, documents, financial records, and handwritten notes in Diana's distinctive handwriting. Kate recognized her mother-in-law's writing immediately. The same flowing script that had appeared on birthday cards and thank you notes throughout the years. The documents told a story of corruption that reached the highest levels of government and the royal family's inner circle. Diana had discovered evidence of illegal arms deals, of charity money being diverted to private accounts, of contracts being awarded to companies owned by people she had considered friends and advisors. She was going to expose all of this, William said, pointing to a list of names that included several prominent politicians and businessmen. She had meetings scheduled with journalists, with investigators, with people who could have helped her bring this to light. Kate studied the documents, her heart breaking as she read Diana's notes about her growing fear and isolation. In her own words, Diana described feeling like she couldn't trust anyone, like the very people who were supposed to protect her were the ones she needed protection from. "This changes everything," Kate said quietly. "If this is true, if these documents are real, then the people responsible for your mother's death are still out there. They're still in positions of power, still making decisions that affect millions of people." William nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Sarah Mitchell is dying," he said. "She gave me these documents because she wants me to finish what my mother started. She wants me to make sure the truth comes out." Kate looked at her husband, seeing the pain and determination in his eyes. She knew that this decision would change their lives forever, would put their family in danger, would create enemies in places where they had always expected to find allies. "What do you want to do?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. William stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the gardens where his children would soon be playing, he thought about his mother's legacy, about the good she had tried to do in the world, about the justice she had been denied for 25 years. "I want to call Harry," he said finally. "He deserves to know the truth about our mother. And then I want to find journalists we can trust, investigators who can verify these documents and help us expose the people responsible. Kate nodded, understanding that there was no going back from this moment. It's going to be dangerous, she said. The people who killed your mother won't hesitate to come after us if they think we're a threat. William turned back to his wife, and Kate saw a strength in his eyes that she had never seen before. They already took my mother from me, he said. They took her from Harry, from her grandchildren she'll never meet, from all the good work she could have done if she had lived. I won't let them get away with it anymore. That evening, after the children were in bed, William called his brother. The conversation was difficult, painful, but necessary. Harry listened in stunned silence as William explained what he had learned, what Sarah Mitchell had revealed, what the documents contained. I always knew there was something wrong with the official story, Harry said when William finished. But this is bigger than anything I imagined. What do we do now? William looked at Kate, who was sitting beside him holding his hand. We finish what she started, he said. We make sure the truth comes out, no matter what it costs us. Harry was quiet for a long moment, and William could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. I'm with you, Harry said finally. Whatever you need, wherever this leads, I'm with you. After the call ended, William and Kate sat together in the quiet living room, surrounded by the evidence of a conspiracy that had cost Diana her life. They both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new decisions that would affect not just their family, but the entire monarchy. Are you sure about this? Kate asked. Giving William one last chance to change his mind, William picked up one of his mother's handwritten notes, reading her words about wanting to make the world a better place for her sons. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he said. My mother died trying to expose the truth. The least I can do is make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Kensington Palace. William was reviewing the documents again when his private secretary announced that someone from the cabinet office was requesting an urgent meeting. Kate felt her blood run. Cold as she realized how quickly word had spread about yesterday's encounter, Sir Richard Pemberton, man William had known since childhood, entered the study with a serious expression. He had been a friend of the family for decades, someone William had always trusted completely. But now, looking at the man who had helped shape royal policy for the past 20 years, William wondered if he was staring at one of the people responsible. For his mother's death, Sir Richard said, his voice carefully controlled, I understand you had an interesting meeting yesterday. William felt Kate's hand tighten on his arm. They had been watched, followed, monitored. The realization that their every move was being tracked sent a chill through both of them. I don't know what you mean, William replied. But he could see from Sir Richard's expression that denial was pointless. Sir Richard sat down without being invited, his eyes scanning the coffee table where some of Diana's documents were still scattered. Sarah Mitchell contacted us after your meeting, he said. She's a sick woman, William. Cancer has affected her mind. The things she told you, the documents she gave you, they're not real. William felt anger rising in his chest. Are you calling my mother a liar? He asked, pointing to Diana's handwritten notes. Because this is her handwriting, her signature, her investigation. Sir Richard's composure cracked slightly. Your mother was investigating some financial irregularities, yes. But she was misunderstanding what she was seeing. She was creating connections where none existed, building conspiracy theories out of routine business transactions. Kate spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. If that's true, then why wasn't any of this mentioned? In the official investigations, why was Sarah Mitchell never questioned? Sir Richard turned to Kate with a look that was almost pitying, because we were trying to protect the royal family from embarrassment. Diana was becoming increasingly unstable in her final months, making wild accusations against people who had served the crown faithfully for decades. We didn't want her mental state to become public knowledge. William stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. My mother was not unstable. She was investigating corruption, and she was getting close to the truth. Close enough that someone decided she was too dangerous to live. Richard sighed heavily as if he was dealing with a difficult child. William, I understand your need to find meaning in your mother's death, to believe that she died for some noble cause. But sometimes tragic accidents are just that, accidents. The paparazzi, the drunk driver, the speed of the car, these things combine to create a perfect storm of tragedy. William picked up one of the financial documents, waving it in front of Sir Richard's face. Then explain this. Explain why there are millions of pounds missing from charity accounts, why arms deals were being approved without proper oversight, why contracts were being awarded to companies owned by people in this room. Sir Richard's eyes hardened. You're playing with fire, William. The people named in those documents are not your enemies. They're the people who have kept this country stable, who have protected the monarchy from scandals that could have destroyed it. If you start making accusations based on the fantasies of a dying woman, you'll tear apart institutions that have served Britain for centuries. Kate stood up beside her husband, her voice strong and clear. And if we don't, we'll be protecting the people who murdered Diana. The room fell silent. Sir Richard stared at Kate for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing his options, deciding how to handle this threat to whatever conspiracy he was part of. I came here to offer you a choice, sir, Richard said finally. Can return those documents to me, forget about Sarah Mitchell and her stories, and continue your lives as senior members of the royal family. Or you can pursue this investigation and face the consequences. William felt something shift inside him, a clarity that he had never experienced before. What consequences? He asked. Sir Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The same consequences your mother faced when she wouldn't listen to reason. The same consequences that await anyone who threatens the stability of the institutions that keep this country functioning. Kate gasped, and William felt the world tilt around him. Sir Richard had just admitted that Diana's death was not an accident, that it was a deliberate act carried out by people who considered themselves patriots. You killed her, William said, his voice barely above a whisper. You killed my mother. Sir Richard stood up, straightening his jacket. I didn't kill anyone, he said calmly. But I did what was necessary to protect the crown, to protect the country, to protect the world from the chaos that would have resulted if your mother's accusations had been made public. William lunged forward, but Kate caught his arm, holding him back. Sir Richard watched the exchange with amusement, as if he was enjoying their pain. The documents you have are copies, Sir Richard continued. Sarah Mitchell was smart enough to keep the originals hidden. If you want to see them, if you want to complete your mother's investigation, you'll need to find them. But I warn you, William, every step you take down this path will be more dangerous than the last. He walked to the door, then turned back. To face them. Your mother thought she was protecting you boys by pursuing this investigation. She thought she was making the world safer for you. Instead, she'll put you in danger that will follow you for the rest of your lives. The question is, are you going to make the same mistake she did? After Sir Richard left, William and Kate sat in stunned silence. The man they had trusted, the man who had helped raise William, the man who had stood beside the royal family through decades of crises and celebrations, was one of the people responsible for Diana's death. What do we do now? Kate asked, her voice shaking. William looked at his mother's documents, at the evidence of corruption that had cost her life, at the proof that the people they trusted most were their greatest enemies. We find the originals, he said. We finish what she started, and we make sure the truth comes out, no matter what it costs us. Finding Sarah Mitchell proved more difficult than William had expected. The phone number she had given him was disconnected, and the address led to an empty apartment with no forwarding information. It was as if she had vanished completely, leaving behind only the explosive documents that had turned William's world upside down. Kate spent hours on the phone with private investigators, people who specialized in finding missing persons. Most of them refused to help once they learned who was asking, but finally, a former police detective named James Crawford agreed to meet with him. Crawford was a man in his 60s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. He listened quietly as William explained what they were looking for, why they needed to find Sarah Mitchell, what was at stake. She's not missing, Crawford said, when William finished. She's hiding. There's a difference. Missing. People leave traces, clues about where they went or what happened to them. Hiding people disappear on purpose, and they're usually very good at it. Kate leaned forward in her chair. Can you find her? Crawford studied the documents William had shown him, his expression growing more serious as he read. These are real, he said finally. I've seen enough forged documents to know the difference, and these are authentic. Which means your mother was investigating some very dangerous people, and this woman, Sarah Mitchell, has been carrying this secret for 25 years. He closed the folder and looked directly at William. I can find her, but I need to know what you're planning to do with this information. Because if you're thinking about going public with this, you're not just putting yourselves in danger, you're putting me in danger too. William felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. Every decision he made affected, not just his family, but everyone who tried to help them. We want justice for my mother, he said. We want the truth to come out, and we want the people responsible to face consequences. Crawford nodded slowly. Then you need to understand something. The people named in these documents, they're not just corrupt officials or greedy businessmen. They're part of a network that has been protecting itself for decades. They have resources, connections, influence that reaches into every corner of government and media. If you go after them, they'll come after you with everything they have. Kate squeezed William's hand. We understand the risks, she said. But we can't let my mother-in-law's death be for nothing. Can't let these people continue to operate without consequences. Crawford studied them both for a long moment, then made his decision. I'll find Sarah Mitchell, he said. But once I do, you're on your own. I can't protect you from what comes next. 2 days later, Crawford called with an address. Sarah Mitchell was in a hospice in Scotland using a false name, dying alone except for the nurses who cared for her. William and Kate drove north immediately, knowing that time was running out. The hospice was a peaceful place, surrounded by gardens and filled with the quiet dignity of people spending their final days in comfort. Sarah was in a private room, much thinner than she had been just days earlier, but her eyes were still bright with determination. I knew you would come, she said, when William and Kate entered her room. I knew you wouldn't give up. William sat down beside her bed, taking her frail hand in his. We need the original documents, he said. We need proof that can't be dismissed or discredited. Sarah smiled weakly. Your mother was very smart about hiding things. She knew that if something happened to her, the evidence needed to survive. She created multiple copies, hid them in different locations, made sure that the truth would come out eventually. She gestured to a small box on the bedside table, the key to a safety deposit box in Switzerland. Your mother opened it under a false name, using documents that can't be traced back to her. Everything is there, all the original evidence, all the proof you need. Kate picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. Why Switzerland? She asked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Because your mother knew that nowhere in Britain would be safe. She knew that the people she was investigating had connections. Everywhere influence that reached into every institution she might have trusted. William felt his heart breaking as he realized how alone his mother had been in her final months. How frightened she must have been, how desperate to protect her sons from the truth she had uncovered. There's something else, Sarah continued, her voice growing weaker. Your mother recorded videos, messages for you and Harry. She wanted to explain everything. To tell you in her own words why she was doing this investigation, what she hoped to accomplish. She pointed to a small device on the nightstand. It's all there. Her words, her voice, her love for you boys.
Yes.
She wanted you to know that everything she did to make the world safer for you and your children. William picked up the device. With shaking hands, knowing that he was about to hear his mother's voice for the first time in 25 years, Sarah watched him with sad eyes, understanding the emotional weight of what she was giving him. She loved you so much, Sarah whispered. Both of you. She was so proud of the men you were becoming, so hopeful about the future you would build. She wanted to leave you a world where corruption and violence couldn't touch you. Kate wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her husband struggle with the gift he had been given. What happens now? She asked Sarah. Sarah closed her eyes, exhaustion overwhelming her. Now you finish what she started. You make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Make sure the truth comes out, no matter what it costs you. As they prepared to leave, Sarah called out one final time. "William," she said, her voice barely audible. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of failing you boys. Don't let her down." William and Kate drove back to London in silence, the weight of their responsibility heavier than ever. They had the key to uncovering the truth, but they also had a target on their backs. The people who had killed Diana would not hesitate to kill again to protect their secrets. That night, as they put their children to bed, William and Kate knew that everything was about to change. Tomorrow, they would listen to Diana's final messages, learn the full scope of her investigation, and decide whether to risk everything to expose the truth. The door had been opened, and there was no going back. The plane landed in London as darkness covered the sky. William and Kate walked through the airport holding hands tightly. In William's bag were copies of all the documents and recordings they had found in Switzerland. Alsta vu original evidence that his mother, Diana, had hidden before she died, was now in their possession. During the flight home, they had made important decisions. They would tell their children the truth about their grandmother. They would contact trusted journalists who could help them expose the corruption. They would finish what Diana had started 25 years ago. But as their car approached Kensington Palace, William saw something that made his heart stop. Several black cars were parked outside the gates. Men in dark suits stood waiting for them. Sir Richard Pemberton was there too. The man who had visited them days earlier and admitted to being part of the conspiracy that killed Diana. Kate squeezed William's hand harder. She was scared, but determined not to show it. They both knew this moment would come. The people who killed Diana would not let them expose the truth without a fight. The car stopped, and William stepped out first. He looked directly at Sir Richard, the man he had trusted since childhood, the man who had helped murder his mother. Kate stood beside him, her chin raised with courage that reminded William of Diana. Sir Richard walked toward them with a cold smile on his face. Behind him, the other men moved closer, forming a circle around William and Kate. They were trapped, but they were not helpless. This time they had evidence, proof, the truth that Diana had died protecting. "I hope your trip to Switzerland was worth the trouble," Sir Richard said in a voice that sounded friendly, but carried a clear threat. "I trust you found what you were looking for in that safety deposit box." William felt anger rising in his chest. These people had been watching them, following them, monitoring their every move. They knew about Sarah Mitchell, about the documents, about everything Diana had hidden. But they did not know that William and Kate had made copies of all the evidence. "We found everything," William said, his voice steady and strong. "Every document. Diana collected every recording she made. Every piece of proof that shows what you and your friends did to her." Sir Richard's smile disappeared. His face became hard and dangerous. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, William. Your mother thought she could change the world by exposing a few corrupt officials. She was naive. She was dangerous. And she paid the price for her foolishness." Kate stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. Diana was brave. She was investigating crimes that reached the highest levels of government. She was trying to protect innocent people from the corruption that you and your network have been hiding. For decades, Sir Richard laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Protecting innocent people? Your mother was going to destroy institutions that have kept this country stable for centuries. She was going to expose operations that protect British interests around the world. She would have caused chaos that could have led to war, economic collapse, the end of everything we've worked to build. William thought about the recordings they had listened to in Switzerland. Diana's voice explaining how charity money was being stolen to fund illegal operations, how arms deals were being approved without proper oversight, how people who asked too many questions were eliminated. "You call it stability," William said. "I call it murder, theft, and corruption. My mother called it evil, and she was right." Sir Richard's patience was running out. The other men moved closer, their hands moving toward weapons hidden under their jackets. William realized they were in serious danger, but he also realized something else. These men were scared. They were desperate. They had killed Diana to protect their secrets, and now those secrets were about to be exposed. "You have a choice, sir," Richard said. "Give us the documents and recordings. Forget about your mother's investigation. Live your lives as members of the royal family, safe and protected. Or continue down this path and face the same fate as Diana." Kate felt her heart pounding, but her voice remained calm. "You're threatening to kill us, just like you killed Diana." Sir Richard shrugged. "I'm offering you a chance to live. It's the same chance we offered your mother. She chose to ignore our warnings. She chose to put her investigation above the safety of her family, above the stability of the nation. Look how that ended for her." William thought about his children sleeping safely in their beds inside the palace. Yes. He thought about the life he and Kate had built together, the future they had planned. But then he thought about his mother's voice. On those recordings, her courage in the face of threats, her determination to expose the truth, no matter the cost. "My mother didn't die for nothing," William said. "She died because she believed the truth was more important than her own safety. She believed her sons deserved to live in a world where justice exists, where corruption has consequences, where good people don't have to be afraid of evil ones." Sir Richard's face showed frustration and anger. "You're as naive as she was. Think you can expose this conspiracy and somehow make everything better. But do you know what will happen when this information becomes public? Governments will fall. International agreements will collapse. People will die in the chaos that follows." Kate stepped closer to her husband, drawing strength from his courage. "People are already dying because of your corruption. Children in war zones are being killed by weapons you've sold illegally. Families are starving because you've stolen money meant to help them. The chaos you're worried about is already happening because of what you've done." William reached into his bag and pulled out one of the recording devices Diana had used. "We have you explaining how to steal charity money, how to approve illegal arms deals, how to eliminate people who ask too many questions. We have recordings of you threatening my mother weeks before she died." Sir Richard stared at the device. In William's hand, for the first time, he looked genuinely worried. "Those recordings were destroyed," he said quietly. William smiled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like Diana. "My mother was smarter than you thought. Made multiple copies of everything. She hid evidence in places you never found. She planned for this moment, Richard. She planned for the day when her sons would have the power to expose you." The other men were getting restless, waiting for orders from Sir Richard. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute, but William and Kate stood their ground. Knowing that backing down now would dishonor Diana's memory and put their children's future at risk, Sir Richard made a decision. He nodded to the other men, and they began moving toward William and Kate. But at that moment, car headlights appeared at the end of the drive. More vehicles were approaching the palace, but these were not part of Sir Richard's team. James Crawford, the private investigator who had helped them find Sarah Mitchell, stepped out of the lead car. Behind him were journalists, camera crews, and law enforcement officers who had been waiting for William's signal. Sir Richard realized he had been outmaneuvered. While he had been focused on intimidating William and Kate, they had been preparing their own response. The evidence was already being distributed to media outlets around the world. The truth about Diana's death was about to become public. There was nothing Sir Richard could do to stop it. William looked at the man who had killed his mother, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "It's over, Richard. The truth is coming out. Diana's investigation is finally complete." As police officers moved to arrest Sir Richard and his associates, William and Kate stood together in the darkness, holding each other close. They had kept their promise to Diana. They had finished what she started. Justice was finally within. Reached inside the palace, their children slept peacefully, unaware that their parents had just changed the course of history. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth about Princess Diana's death. Tomorrow, justice would begin for the woman who had died trying to make the world a better place for her sons. The door that Diana had opened 25 years ago was finally wide open, and the light of truth was shining through.